More human beings have walked on the surface of the moon than have ever traveled to the bottom of the ocean. Hold that thought for a moment before you let the night take you. We have left footprints in the gray dust of another world, 250,000 miles away. We have driven machines across the red deserts of Mars and listened to the wind on its empty plains. We have flung telescopes so far out into the dark that they catch the faint, ancient light of galaxies older than the Earth itself. And yet the deepest place on our own planet, a place we could reach, in theory, in the span of a single afternoon's slow fall through the water, has been visited by fewer people than you could seat around a dinner table. It lies far beneath the western Pacific, in a long, narrow wound in the floor of the sea called the Mariana Trench, and at the very bottom of that trench, lower than anywhere else on the surface of the Earth, is a place we have named the Challenger Deep. It is nearly 11 kilometers straight down. If you could tear Mount Everest up from its roots and set it gently into that trench, the summit, the roof of our world, the place climbers give their lives to stand upon, would still lie more than 2 kilometers beneath the waves. The whole mountain would simply disappear into the dark, and the water would close over the top of it without a ripple, without a sound, as though it had never been there at all. Down at that depth, the pressure is almost beyond the reach of imagination. The weight of all that water pressing down adds up to more than 1,000 times the pressure you feel right now, lying comfortably in the air. It is enough to crush an ordinary submarine like an empty can closed in a fist, enough to collapse steel, and the cold is constant, just above freezing, held there in perfect darkness, for no ray of sunlight, however faint, has ever reached this place, and none ever will. The last of the light gives out kilometers above. Below that, there is only black water, and more black water, falling away into a dark so complete that the word darkness hardly seems to cover it. And here is the strange thing, the thing that will carry us, gently, all the way through this long night together. That place, crushing and lightless and colder than ice, and yet somehow never freezing, more hostile than the surface of any planet we have ever found, that place is not empty. Something lives down there, not one thing, but many. Pale, delicate creatures that have never known light, animals built to withstand a pressure that would kill us in an instant, things we have glimpsed only a handful of times, for a few minutes each, in the cold beam of a passing camera, and almost certainly far stranger things that we have never glimpsed at all. So the deepest place on Earth turns out to be one of the last, truly unknown places left to us. We have mapped the far side of the moon in finer detail than we have mapped the floor of our own ocean. We have better photographs of the polar ice caps of Mars than of the bottom of the sea that covers most of our world. The trench is closer to you, right now, than almost any city on another continent, and we know less about what lives at the bottom of it than we know about worlds we will never touch. Tonight, we are going to go down there, slowly, gently, in no hurry at all. We are going to begin at the bright, warm surface, where the sunlight still plays on the waves, and we are going to sink, layer by layer, through every level of the sea, past the last of the light, past the creatures that glow in the dark, down through the midnight water, and into the great cold plain below it, and finally into the trench itself, all the way to the silent floor at the very bottom of the world. Along the way, we will meet the handful of human beings brave enough, or strange enough, to have made this journey themselves. We will find out what truly lives in water that should, by every rule we know, be dead. We will listen to the strange sounds that rise out of the abyss, sounds that frightened the scientists who first heard them, and we will ask, again and again, the oldest and quietest question there is: what is really down there, in the last unexplored place on Earth? There is nothing you need to do tonight but listen, and breathe, and let yourself sink. So dim the lights. Find the position you mean to sleep in, and settle into it fully. Let your shoulders drop away from your ears. Let the small muscles of your face go slack, the jaw, the brow, the space between your eyes. Let your breathing slow and lengthen and deepen all on its own, and let us begin, together, to sink down through the warm water and into the dark, toward the deepest, quietest place on Earth. Let's begin. We start, as every descent must, at the surface in the light. If you have ever swum out beyond the shallows on a calm day and turned to float on your back, you already know the surface of the sea. The sun warm on your face, the water rocking you, slow and patient, the way a hand rocks a cradle, the light coming down through the upper water in long moving shafts, gold and green, swaying as the waves pass overhead. This is the part of the ocean we know, the part that has fed us and carried us and frightened us, and called us out past the edge of the land for as long as there have been people to stand on a shore and wonder what lies beyond it. But this bright, familiar layer, the sunlit zone, the scientists call it, is only the thinnest skin stretched over something almost unimaginably deep. It reaches down perhaps 200 meters before the light begins to fail. 200 meters, the length of a couple of city blocks. And beneath it, the ocean keeps going down and down and down for kilometers. If the whole depth of the sea were the height of a tall building, the sunlit zone, everything we have ever seen with our own eyes while swimming, everything in every photograph of a coral reef or a school of bright fish you have ever admired, would be the thin band of light under the very top floor. Everything else, all the vast, dark bulk of the building below, is the deep, and almost none of it has ever been seen. Imagine you are floating there now, at the surface, in the last of the warm light. The water is a clear, deep blue. Below you, your own shadow falls away into water that grows slowly darker as your eye follows it down, until it fades into a blue, so deep it is almost black, and then into nothing at all. Most of us, looking down into that, feel a small, ancient flicker of unease, the body's old memory of deep water, of not knowing what is beneath us. Tonight, set that aside. There is nothing beneath you that wishes you any harm. There is only the great, slow, patient body of the sea, going about its ancient business in the dark, exactly as it has for longer than there have been eyes to watch it. And tonight, instead of turning back toward the shore, we are going to do the thing the body always resists. We are going to let ourselves sink, slowly, without fear, down through the warm water and into the cool, and then into the cold, and then into the dark, following the light all the way to the place where it finally gives out, and then going further still. Let yourself begin to drift downward now, in your mind. There is no rush. The first part of the journey is the gentlest. As you sink past the surface, the first thing that changes is the warmth. The sun's heat reaches only the topmost layer of the sea, and it fades quickly. Within the first few tens of meters, the warmth falls away behind you, and the water turns cool, and then cold, and the temperature settles into the steady chill that it will keep, more or less, for the rest of the long descent. There is a layer the divers call the thermocline, a kind of invisible boundary in the water, where the warm surface gives way to the cold deep. And if you have ever swum in a deep lake in summer and felt your legs pass suddenly into colder water while your shoulders stayed warm, you have touched the edge of it. Below the thermocline, the ocean forgets the sun's warmth entirely. From here all the way to the bottom, the sea is cold. The next thing that changes is the color. Sunlight, which looks white or gold to us, is really made of every color woven together, and the water takes those colors apart, one by one, as you descend. The reds go first. Within the first 10 meters or so, red simply ceases to exist. A red object down here would look brown, then gray, then black. Orange follows, and then yellow. By the time you have sunk a few tens of meters, the whole warm half of the rainbow has been quietly stripped away, and the world around you has become a deepening blue. Sink further, and even the blue begins to darken. Green fades, the water grows dim, and then dimmer, the way the world dims in the last long minutes of dusk, except that here the dusk does not end in a sunset. It simply keeps deepening, slowly, steadily, the longer you fall. This is the beginning of the second great layer of the sea, the twilight zone. The scientists give it a colder, more precise name, the mesopelagic, but twilight is the truer word, because that is exactly what it is, a vast layer of perpetual gloom, stretching from around 200 meters down to perhaps 1,000, where the sunlight from above has faded almost, but not quite, to nothing. It is the largest twilight in the world. It wraps the entire planet in a single continuous band of dim blue water, and it holds more living things than all the rest of the ocean combined, though we will come to them in their own time. For now, simply notice the quality of the light as you sink into it. Not darkness, not yet. A deep, dim, endless blue, like the last moment of evening held forever. The color, the sky becomes a few minutes after the sun has gone but before the first star appears. Keep sinking. Let the blue grow darker around you. There is still nothing here to fear. The water is cold and clean and quiet, and the pressure, though it is building steadily as you descend, presses on you evenly from all sides, so gently and so completely that you would scarcely feel it as anything but a kind of soft, total embrace. And as the last of the blue light fades, somewhere around the lower edge of the twilight zone, you begin to notice something that should not be possible in a place so far from the sun. There are lights down here, small ones, faint ones, points and sparks and slow drifting glows, blue, green, and cold, appearing and vanishing in the dark all around you. They are not reflections, for there is nothing left to reflect. They are not sunlight, for the sunlight is gone. They are alive. Each one of those tiny lights is a living creature, making its own light in the dark, and we will come to understand them and why they glow a little further down. For now, simply let them be what they first appear to be, a scattering of cold blue stars, drifting in the black water all around you, as though you had sunk not into the deep sea but up into a strange and silent night sky, seen from the inside. Let your breathing slow a little further. We are leaving the light behind now. Below this, there is no more day. Below the twilight zone, at around 1,000 meters down, the last trace of sunlight finally surrenders. Not a glimmer of it remains. From here all the way to the floor of the sea, the water is black, a black so complete and so total that it is unlike anything most human beings ever experience in their whole lives. Even on the darkest night on land, there is some light. The faint gray of clouds, the distant smudge of a town, the stars. Here there is nothing. If you held your own hand a few centimeters from your face, you would not see the faintest outline of it. This is the midnight zone, and it is the largest single habitat on the entire planet. A vast, lightless realm of cold black water that makes up most of the living space on Earth, and through which we are now slowly, gently falling. You might expect this to be the most frightening part of the descent. Strangely, it is often the calmest. There is nothing to strain your eyes toward, nothing to watch for, nothing to do. The pressure holds you on every side like a great soft hand. The cold is steady, the dark is complete, and in that completeness, there is a kind of peace that people who have been down here in submersibles often struggle to describe, a sense of having left the busy, bright, demanding world entirely behind and entered a place older and quieter than anything up above. There is no day here to wake to, no sun to rise, no clock the body can read. There is only the dark water and the slow drift downward, and the cold, blue, occasional sparks of living light, far off in the black. We will spend a great deal of this night in the dark, so let it become familiar to you now, the way the dark of your own room becomes familiar after you have lain in it a while. There is nothing in it to fear. The deep dark of the ocean is not an absence of safety. It is simply the natural state of most of the water on our world, the ordinary condition of the sea, which is mostly deep and mostly cold and mostly black, and was that way for billions of years before there was anyone to find it strange. But before we go all the way down, before we reach the trench itself and the floor at the very bottom of it, it is worth pausing here, suspended in the black water, to ask a simple question. How do we know any of this? How can we possibly know what the bottom of the ocean is like, or what lives there, when almost no human being has ever been? Who first went down into the deep, and what did it take to get there? The story of how we came to touch the bottom of the world is one of the strangest and bravest in the whole history of exploration. And it is far shorter than you might think. For nearly all of human history, for the thousands of years of ships and sailors and sea charts, the deep ocean was simply unreachable. A person could no more visit the bottom of the sea than they could visit the center of the earth. The water itself was the barrier. Sink a few tens of meters below the surface, and the pressure becomes dangerous. Sink a few tens more, and it becomes deadly. The deep was not a frontier waiting to be crossed. It was a wall. For a long time, people were not even sure what was down there. Some 19th century scientists believed, quite seriously, that below a certain depth the ocean must be completely lifeless, a dead, empty zone of crushing pressure and eternal cold where nothing whatsoever could survive. They called it the azoic theory, the idea that the deep sea was a desert of water, barren all the way down. It was a reasonable guess, given what they knew. The pressure seemed impossible. The darkness was total. There was no sunlight to grow plants. And so, they reasoned, there could be no food, and so there could be no life. The deep ocean was written off, on paper, as the largest dead space on the planet. And then, slowly, the sea began to prove them wrong. The first great blow to the idea came from a single, extraordinary voyage. In the 1870s, a British naval ship called the Challenger, and remember that name, because the deepest place on Earth would one day be named in its honor, set out on a journey that would last almost 4 years and circle the entire globe. Her crew had refitted her as a floating laboratory, the first of its kind, and her mission was simply to study the sea, its depths, its temperatures, its chemistry, and above all, the life within it. Again and again, all around the world, they lowered weighted lines and dredges thousands of meters down into water that was supposed to be dead, and again, they hauled them back up with living creatures tangled in them. Strange ones, pale ones, animals no one had ever seen, brought up from depths where life was not supposed to exist. The Azoic theory crumbled under the weight of the evidence. The deep was not dead. It was full of life of a kind no one had imagined. It was the Challenger expedition, too, that first found the trench. Out in the western Pacific, near a chain of islands called the Marianas, they lowered a weighted-sounding line to measure the depth of the sea, and it went down and down and kept going down, far past any depth that had ever been recorded. They had stumbled, without any way of truly grasping it, onto the edge of the deepest place in the world. The deepest point of all would later be named the Challenger Deep, in memory of that ship and that astonishing voyage. But finding the trench and reaching the bottom of it are two entirely different things. The Challenger could measure the depth with a line. To actually go down there, to put a human being at the bottom of the deepest trench on Earth and bring them back alive would take most of another century, and a machine unlike anything that had ever been built. That machine was the dream of a single remarkable family. A Swiss physicist named Auguste Piccard had already done something no one else had done. He had built a balloon and ridden it higher into the sky than any human being before him, up into the thin, cold edge of the stratosphere, sealed inside a pressurized metal sphere of his own design. And having gone higher than anyone, he turned his mind to going deeper than anyone, for the problem, he realized, was strangely similar. To survive in the near vacuum of the high atmosphere, you needed a sealed sphere strong enough to hold ordinary pressure in against the emptiness outside. To survive at the bottom of the sea, you needed a sealed sphere strong enough to hold the crushing pressure of the deep out. Piccard designed a vessel he called a bathyscaphe, from the Greek words for deep and ship, a kind of underwater balloon, with a float full of liquid lighter than water to carry it back up, and slung beneath it a tiny, immensely strong steel sphere just large enough to hold two people. The vessel was named the Trieste, and on a January morning in the year 1960, Auguste Piccard's son, Jacques Piccard, climbed into that little sphere together with a United States Navy officer named Don Walsh, sealed the hatch, and began the longest descent any human being had ever made. Imagine, for a moment, what that took. The two men were sealed inside a steel ball barely 2 meters across, so small they could hardly move, sitting almost knee to knee in the cold and the damp. Below them was nearly 11 kilometers of black water, and a pressure that no human being had ever survived. No one had ever been where they were going. No one knew, for certain, whether the sphere would hold. The descent alone took most of 5 hours. 5 hours of sinking, slowly, into deepening dark, watching the last blue light fail through a single small window, and then watching nothing at all, falling for hours through total blackness toward a floor no human eye had ever seen. Partway down, in the cold and the dark, there was a sudden heavy crack, a sound loud enough to shake the whole vessel. Something had given way. The two men could do nothing but wait, and listen, and continue their fall, not knowing whether the sphere that held their lives was about to fail. It would turn out, much later, that a single outer window had cracked under the strain, not the sphere itself, not the part that kept them alive. But in that moment, kilometers down, with no way back but up and no way to hurry, they simply had to trust the machine and keep sinking and breathe. And then, after nearly 5 hours of falling, the Trieste touched the bottom of the world. They had reached the floor of the Challenger Deep, the lowest point on the surface of the Earth, a place no living thing from the world above had ever been. Outside the window, in the beam of the vessel's light, was fine pale sediment, soft as flour, stirred into a slow cloud by their arrival. And then Jacques Piccard saw something that changed everything, something he would speak of for the rest of his life. There, on the floor of the deepest trench in the ocean, in the place that the old scientists had sworn was a dead and barren desert, under more than 1,000 times the pressure of the surface, in eternal cold and absolute dark, there was a fish. A flat, pale, slow-moving fish, resting on the bottom, watching the strange lit machine that had fallen into its world. Life. At the very bottom, in the deepest, darkest, most crushing place on the entire planet, there was a living creature, going quietly about its existence, as though the bottom of the world were simply home, which, of course, to it was. The two men stayed on the bottom for only about 20 minutes. The cracked window made it unwise to linger, and the cold was seeping into the little sphere. Then they released their heavy ballast, and the great float carried them slowly back up toward the light. Hours of rising through the dark, until at last they broke the surface into the ordinary afternoon and the waiting ship. They had done it. They had gone to the bottom of the world and come back alive. And then, and this is the strangest part of the whole story, for 52 years, no human being went back. 52 years. Think of everything that happened in the world between 1960 and 2012. We landed on the moon, not once but 6 times, and walked upon it, and brought home pieces of it. We built space stations and lived in orbit for months on end. We sent machines past every planet in the solar system and out into the dark beyond. We invented entire new worlds of computers and networks that reshaped daily life on the whole surface of the planet. And in all that time, through all of that astonishing progress, not one single human being returned to the deepest place on our own Earth. The bottom of the Challenger Deep, once touched, was simply left alone, too deep, too dark, too difficult, too far from anything that seemed to matter. The deepest place in the world had been visited exactly once, by 2 men, for 20 minutes, and then abandoned to its ancient silence. It was not a government, in the end, or a navy, that finally went back. It was a filmmaker. The film director James Cameron, the man behind some of the largest films ever made, had loved the deep ocean his whole life, and he poured years and a fortune of his own into building a strange, vertical, torpedo-shaped submersible designed to carry one person, alone, all the way to the bottom of the Challenger Deep. In the year 2012, he climbed into it by himself, sealed the hatch, and sank for over 2 hours into the dark, completely alone, to a place only 2 human beings had ever been. He reached the bottom. He spent hours down there, alone in the deepest place on Earth, in a tiny sphere of light surrounded by infinite black, looking out at the pale, empty, alien plain at the bottom of the world. He described it afterward as the most isolated place imaginable, utterly cut off, utterly silent, more remote than the surface of the moon. And then he, too, rose back to the light. After that, the dam finally broke. In the years that followed, a wealthy explorer named Victor Vescovo set out to reach the deepest point of every one of the world's oceans, and built a submersible tough enough to do it again and again. And so, for the first time, the bottom of the Challenger Deep began to receive something like regular visitors, a handful of people, a few each year, at most, scientists, explorers, people with the rare combination of nerve and resources it takes to fall for hours into the deepest dark in the world. Even now, well into our own century, the total number of human beings who have ever stood, or rather, hovered at the bottom of the Challenger Deep remains astonishingly small, far fewer than have flown into space, far fewer than have stood on the summit of Everest. A tiny handful of people, in all of human history, who have seen with their own eyes the floor at the very bottom of the world. And every single one of them has come back with the same report. It is not empty. There is life down there, even there. Let that settle into you as you drift in the dark. The place we are sinking toward tonight, the deepest, coldest, most crushing place on the entire planet, is a place that life found and made its home, long before we ever arrived to be astonished by it. Keep breathing, slow and deep. We have not even reached the floor yet, and already the deep has begun to give up its first secret, that it was never as dead, or as empty, or as lonely as we feared. Now let us turn to the thing that makes the deep so hard to reach in the first place. The thing that crushed the imagination of the old scientists and very nearly cracked the sphere of the Trieste. The pressure. It is worth understanding, slowly and gently, because it is the single great fact of the deep ocean, the force that shapes everything that lives there, and the reason the bottom of the sea remained beyond us for so long. And it is, once you see it clearly, one of the quiet wonders of the whole story. You live your entire life under pressure, though you almost never feel it. Above your head, right now, rises the whole height of the atmosphere, kilometers upon kilometers of air, stacked all the way up to the edge of space, pressing down on you with its weight. We call that weight one atmosphere of pressure, and it is considerable. It is pushing on every part of your body at this very moment, on your chest, your hands, the backs of your eyes. You do not feel it only because you grew up inside it, and the pressure inside your body pushes back out exactly as hard, so the two balance, and you forget the air is even there. But water is far, far heavier than air. A single bathtub of water weighs more than an entire room full of air. And so, as you sink into the sea, The weight pressing down on you climbs not slowly, like the thinning air of a mountain, but quickly, relentlessly, with every meter you descend. By the time you have sunk just 10 meters below the surface, a depth any swimmer can reach, the pressure on your body has already doubled. 10 meters more, and it has tripled. The pressure keeps climbing. Steadily, the deeper you go, adding the weight of another 10 meters of water with every 10 meters you fall, all the way down. So picture what that becomes. By the time you reach the bottom of the Challenger Deep, nearly 11 kilometers of water, stacked overhead. The pressure down there is more than 1,000 times what you feel in the air right now. More than 1,000 atmospheres. It is difficult to picture such a number, so let us make it real. Imagine the weight of a large car, and then imagine that weight pressing down on an area no bigger than the tip of your thumb. That is roughly the pressure at the bottom of the trench, on every single square inch of everything down there. It is enough to crush a steel cylinder, enough to drive water into the tiniest flaw in a metal hull and split it apart. Enough, the engineers will tell you, that the smallest mistake in the design of a submersible is not a problem to be fixed later. It is instant, total destruction, faster than thought. This is why the deep was a wall for so long. Not the cold, not the dark, the pressure. To send a human being down there alive, you have to build a vessel that can hold all of that weight out a sphere strong enough that the ocean, pressing in on it with the force of 1,000 atmospheres, cannot find a single weakness to exploit. That is what Auguste Piccard solved with the Trieste. That is what James Cameron's strange vertical submarine was built to survive. The whole challenge of reaching the deep, in the end, comes down to building a small bubble of ordinary pressure and keeping it intact against a force that wants nothing more than to close it forever. And now comes the part that should genuinely amaze you. The part that the old scientists, with their dead and empty deep, never saw coming. The creatures that live down there do not need a steel sphere. They have no thick armored hulls, no engineering, no protection of any kind from the crushing weight of the sea. The pale fish that Jacques Piccard saw resting on the floor of the Challenger Deep was not sealed inside anything. It was simply there, in the open, under 1,000 atmospheres of pressure, and it was fine. It was at home. It lived its whole life under a weight that would instantly destroy the most carefully engineered machine we can build, and it did so as easily and as thoughtlessly as you breathe the air. How? How can a soft, delicate, living thing survive a pressure that crushes steel? The answer is so simple and so elegant that it took us a long time to truly understand it. The reason pressure destroys a submarine is that the submarine is full of air, a hollow space of ordinary pressure, with the crushing deep pressing in all around it. The pressure difference between the inside and the outside is what tears it apart. But the creatures of the deep are not hollow. They are not full of air. They are made, like all living things, mostly of water, and water, unlike air, does not compress. You cannot squeeze it smaller. And so the pressure of the deep, pressing in on a deep-sea creature, meets the very same pressure pushing back out from inside its watery body. And the two balance, perfectly, exactly as the air pressure inside you balances the air pressure outside you right now. The creature does not feel the weight of the sea at all. To it, 1,000 atmospheres is simply the way the world has always been, no more remarkable, no more burdensome than the air is to you. There is something almost philosophical in that, worth carrying down into sleep. The thing that seems most impossible about the deep, the crushing, killing pressure is, to the creatures that live there, not a hardship to be endured but simply home. They are not struggling against the deep. They are not surviving. In spite of it, they are perfectly, effortlessly suited to it, shaped over countless millions of years to fit the place exactly, the way you are shaped to fit the thin, warm air at the surface. What is lethal to us is ordinary to them. What is unimaginable to us is, to them, simply Tuesday in the only world they have ever known. It is not quite that simple. Of course, life never is. The pressure of the deep does reach inside the creatures that live there, down to the level of the tiniest machinery of their cells, and at such extremes, even the delicate folded shapes of the proteins that run a living body can begin to deform and fail. And so the animals of the deep have evolved a quiet, invisible trick to hold themselves together. Their bodies are laced with special molecules, the scientists call them piezolites, which means, roughly, pressure stones that gather around the vital machinery of each cell and brace it, gently, against the crushing weight, holding the proteins in their proper shapes so that life can go on as normal. It is a kind of internal scaffolding, woven through every cell, invisible and constant, that lets a soft living thing thrive at a depth that would destroy almost anything we could build. There is a great deal we still do not understand about exactly how it all works, but the broad shape of the answer is clear, and it is beautiful. Life did not conquer the deep by force. It conquered the deep by fitting itself, molecule by molecule, perfectly to the conditions there, until the most hostile place on Earth became, for the things that live in it, simply the ordinary world. Hold on to that idea. We will see it again and again as we sink, in creature after creature, not a desperate struggle for survival in a terrible place, but a quiet, total, ancient belonging. The deep is not a prison its inhabitants are trapped in. It is a home they are exquisitely made for. And now, with that understanding, we can keep falling down past the midnight zone, down toward the floor of the open ocean, and then down, at last, into the trench itself. Let us take a moment, as we sink, to truly grasp the scale of where we are going, because the Mariana Trench is not a small place, and the Challenger Deep is not a simple hole. The trench is enormous. It is a vast, curving scar in the floor of the Western Pacific, stretching more than 2,500 kilometers in a great arc, longer than many mountain ranges, longer than the distance across whole countries. It is shaped a little like a long, narrow canyon, plunging down far below the surrounding seafloor. And it was carved not by water but by the slow, unimaginable forces of the planet itself, the place where one great plate of the Earth's crust bends and slides down beneath another, sinking back into the deep interior of the world. That slow collision, going on over millions of years, has pulled the seafloor down into the deepest furrow on the planet's surface. And the Challenger Deep is the very lowest point of all, a small, deep basin near the southern end of that great trench, the single deepest place that has ever been measured on the surface of the Earth. To stand at the bottom of it, you would be further below sea level than the highest aircraft fly above it. You would be so deep that the entire bright, busy, living surface world, the waves, the ships, the sunlight, the whole sphere of ordinary human life would be nearly 11 kilometers straight up over your head, as remote and unreachable as the sky. Imagine you are sinking into it now. The walls of the trench rise away on either side, far out in the dark beyond the reach of any light. Vast slopes of pale sediment and bare rock falling away below you into a basin deeper than any other on Earth. There is no sound but the faint creak of the pressure and the slow whisper of your own descent. There is no light but what you bring with you, a small pool of it in an ocean of black, and the water grows, if anything, stranger and quieter and more still the deeper you fall, until you begin to feel that you have left the ocean you knew entirely behind and entered some other element altogether, a place not so much beneath the world as outside it. Let your breathing slow to match the slowness of the descent. There is no hurry. The bottom has waited millions of years. It will wait a little longer for us. So let us meet the things that live here. For 2 centuries, remember, the deep was supposed to be dead. The crushing pressure, the eternal cold, the total dark, and above all the absence of any sunlight to grow the plants that feed every food chain we knew, all of it seemed to add up to a single, obvious conclusion. Nothing could live down there. The deep ocean was the largest empty space on the planet. And yet, here, in the cold beam of our light, the deep begins, gently, to fill with life. The first creatures you are likely to meet, drifting down toward the floor of the trench, are not large or fearsome. They are small, pale, and astonishingly numerous. And they are, in their way, the unsung heroes of the entire deep sea. They are called amphipods, small shrimp-like creatures, distant relatives of the sandhoppers you may have seen leaping about in the seaweed on a beach. Up at the surface, their cousins are tiny, a few millimeters long. But down here, in the trenches, something strange has happened to them. They have grown. There is a pattern in the deep sea that scientists have noticed again and again, and have never fully explained. Certain creatures, when they live in the cold and the dark and the pressure of the deep, grow far larger than their relatives in the shallows. They call it deep sea gigantism, and the trench amphipods are one of its strangest examples. In the shallows, an amphipod is a speck. Down in the Hadal trenches, there lives a kind of amphipod so large that the scientists who first hauled them up could scarcely believe what they were seeing: pale, armored, segmented creatures the size of a human hand, or larger, drifting through the deepest water on Earth. The supergiants, they came to be called. No one is entirely certain why the deep makes them so big. Perhaps the cold slows their lives and lets them grow for longer. Perhaps the scarcity of food rewards a body large enough to store a great meal against the long hunger between. Perhaps it is something we have not yet thought of. The deep keeps that secret. For now, these pale amphipods swarm in their countless thousands across the floor of the trench, and they are, above all, scavengers, the cleanup crew of the abyss. When anything dies in the ocean far above and sinks, eventually, to the bottom, it is the amphipods who find it first, swarming over it in the dark, feeding, recycling the rare gift of food back into the living world of the deep. Lower a baited trap to the bottom of the Challenger Deep, and within hours it will be boiling with them hundreds upon hundreds of pale, hungry, armored creatures, appearing out of the infinite dark, drawn to the scent of a meal across distances we can hardly imagine. They are the proof, swarming and undeniable, that the deepest place on Earth is not a desert at all. It is inhabited. It is busy. It has its own economy of life and death, running quietly in the dark, entirely without us. And where there are creatures to be eaten, there are creatures that eat them, which brings us to the most remarkable resident of the deep trench of all, the animal that holds the record, the deepest fish ever found on Earth, the Hadal snailfish. You would not, at first glance, pick it out as a record breaker. It is not fierce. It is not large. It is not armored against the crushing deep. It is, in fact, one of the most delicate-looking creatures imaginable. A small, pale, almost translucent fish, soft-bodied and tadpole-shaped, with thin, loose skin and large, dark eyes, drifting slowly just above the floor of the trench on gently rippling fins. It looks less like a deep-sea monster than like something made of tissue paper and moonlight, and it lives deeper than any other fish on Earth down in the Hadal zone, the very deepest layer of the ocean, named for Hades, the old underworld of the Greeks, because it lies deeper than anything else has a name for. For a long time, scientists believed there was an absolute limit to how deep a fish could ever live, a depth below which the pressure would simply make the chemistry of a fish's body impossible, no matter how cleverly it was built. And the snailfish lives right at the edge of that limit, in the very deepest water a fish can possibly survive, as though evolution had pressed life downward as far as it could possibly go and then stopped, exactly at the line where life itself runs out. Cameras lowered into the deepest trenches have captured them, pale, calm, unbothered, going about their lives at the bottom of the world, feeding on the swarming amphipods, drifting through a darkness and a pressure that would destroy almost anything else alive. The deepest fish in the world is not a horror. It is a small, soft, gentle thing, perfectly at peace in the most extreme place on the planet. There is a quiet tenderness in that image, worth keeping as you drift toward sleep. The deepest living fish on Earth, the animal that is pushed further into the impossible than any other of its kind, is a delicate, translucent, almost fragile creature, going calmly about its small life in the dark, asking nothing of the vast, hostile world around it but a few amphipods in the cold black water it was made for. But the snailfish and the amphipods are only the beginning. The floor of the trench, when you finally reach it and let your light play across it, turns out to be home to a whole quiet community of creatures, most of them strange beyond easy description, all of them perfectly suited to the place. There are sea cucumbers down here, though that homely name does them no justice, pale, soft, translucent creatures, some of them almost ghostly, that creep across the sediment on the bottom, slowly sifting it for the faint traces of food it contains. In some parts of the deep sea floor, they are the most common large animals of all, drifting and crawling across the mud in great slow herds, the patient grazers of the abyss. Some of them have learned, remarkably, to swim lifting off the bottom and drifting through the black water on rippling, translucent bodies, like slow, pale ghosts moving through the dark. There are creatures called xenophyophores, and here we reach something genuinely strange, even by the standards of the deep. A xenophyophore is, as far as we can tell, a single living cell, but a single cell grown to an enormous size, some of them as large as your hand, sitting on the floor of the deepest trenches like delicate, intricate structures of glass and mud. They build themselves elaborate shells out of the sediment around them, and they are among the most common large life forms on the floor of the Challenger Deep. Think of that. One of the dominant inhabitants of the deepest place on Earth is a single giant cell, patiently assembling itself a home out of the mud at the bottom of the world. We still understand very little about how they live, or how long, or why they grow so large. They are one of the many quiet mysteries waiting in the dark. And underlying all of it, beneath the amphipods and the snailfish and the sea cucumbers and the strange giant cells there, is the most ancient and most successful form of life on the planet, thriving in the deep as it has thrived everywhere on Earth for billions of years. Bacteria, microbes. the invisible, uncountable foundation of the whole living world. The mud at the bottom of the trench is alive with them. Vast, unseen populations of microorganisms living in the sediment, making their living from the slow chemistry of the deep, and forming, in the end, the very bottom of the food chain on which all the rest depends. In some places, they gather into great pale mats and films, faintly visible in the beam of a submersible's light, the only sign on the surface of the mud of the teeming, invisible life within it. So the deep is not dead. It was never dead. It is, in its own slow, cold, patient way, as full of life as anywhere on Earth, a complete living world, with its grazers and its scavengers and its hunters and its invisible foundations, running quietly in the dark, under 1,000 atmospheres of pressure, in a place no sunlight has ever touched. The old scientists got it exactly backward. The deep is not the great empty space of the planet. It is, by volume, very nearly the largest living space there is, and we are only just beginning to learn who lives there, which leaves one enormous question. The question that should be forming in your mind as you drift here in the dark above the living floor of the trench. If there is no sunlight down here, and there is not a single ray of it, and there never has been, then what does all of this life eat? What feeds the amphipods, and the snailfish, and the sea cucumbers, and the bacteria in the mud? Up at the surface, every food chain begins with sunlight. Plants and tiny drifting plant, like things, catch the light and turn it into food, and everything else, all the way up to the great whales and to us, eats them, or eats the things that ate them. But down here there is no light, and so there can be no plants, and so there should be no food at all, and yet life thrives. So where, in the eternal dark, does the food come from? The answer is one of the gentlest and most beautiful images in all of the deep sea, and it is the perfect thing to carry with you now, as your breathing slows and the dark grows soft around you. So let us turn to it next to the slow, endless, silent snowfall that feeds the bottom of the world. It is called marine snow. High above, in the sunlit surface of the sea, life is endlessly busy. Tiny drifting plants catch the sunlight and turn it into food. Small creatures eat them. Larger creatures eat the small ones. Things are born and feed and are eaten and die in their countless billions every single day, all across the bright upper layer of the ocean. And from all of that ceaseless living and dying, a slow and constant rain begins to fall. Every dead and dying thing in the upper ocean, every scrap and fragment and particle, the bodies of creatures too small to see, the cast-off shells and skins, the waste of the living, the dust of the dead, all of it, being heavier than the water, begins, very slowly, to sink. And as it sinks, more particles drift into it and stick, and clump together, and grow, into soft, pale flakes that fall, gently and endlessly, down through the dark water toward the bottom of the sea. It looks, in the beam of a submersible's light, exactly like snow, a soft, slow, silent, perpetual snowfall, drifting down through the black water, glittering as it passes through the light, and then vanishing again into the dark below. Marine snow. The deep sea has its own weather, and it is always, gently, snowing. This snow is the food of the deep. This slow, soft, falling rain of the remains of the world above is, in the end, what feeds almost everything that lives in the dark below. The marine snow drifts down, layer upon layer, day after day, year after year, century after century, settling at last onto the floor of the trench, and there, the amphipods and the sea cucumbers and the bacteria in the mud gather it in and make their living from it. Every creature we have met tonight, in the deepest and most lightless place on Earth, is fed, in the end, by sunlight, not directly, but at one long remove, through this gentle, ceaseless snowfall of the dead, sifting down from the bright world they will never see. There is something almost unbearably gentle about that image, and it is worth resting in for a while as you lie here in the dark. Far above you, the world goes on in all its noise and brightness and hurry, and all the while, quietly, without ceasing, a soft, pale snow of everything that world has finished with is drifting down and down and down through kilometers of darkening water, in perfect silence, to settle at last on the floor of the deep and feed the patient creatures waiting there. The deep is not cut off from the world above. It is joined to it, always, by this slow falling thread, fed by it, sustained by it, in a silent, endless snowfall of light, turned at last to darkness, and of life turned at last to life again. Let the image carry you a little further down toward sleep. The slow snow falling through the dark, the soft pale flakes drifting past, glittering for a moment in the light, and then gone. No sound, no hurry, only the gentle, endless settling of the world down into the quiet at the bottom of everything. But the marine snow is not the only way the deep is fed. Now and then, far more rarely, the deep receives a gift far greater than snow. And when it comes, it transforms everything around it for years. When one of the great whales dies, a creature weighing many tons, the largest animals ever to have lived its enormous body, no longer breathing, no longer rising for air, begins at last to sink. Down it goes, slowly, through the sunlit water and into the twilight and then into the dark, falling for kilometers through the black, until at last, after a journey of many hours, it comes to rest on the floor of the deep. The scientists call this a whale fall, and to the creatures of the deep, it is not a tragedy. It is a feast beyond imagining, a sudden, vast, almost unbelievable abundance of food, arriving out of the dark in a place where food is the rarest thing there is. What follows is one of the strangest and most wonderful processes in the entire ocean. The amphipods and the scavengers come first, in their thousands, swarming over the great body, feeding for months on the rich flesh. Then, as the flesh is stripped away, other creatures arrive to work the bones, including a remarkable kind of worm, discovered only recently, that has no mouth and no stomach at all, but instead sends root-like tendrils down into the whale's bones to dissolve them and feed on the rich fats locked inside. Whole communities of creatures gather and settle and live and breed around the fallen whale. An entire ecosystem springing up in the dark around this single sunken body, a small, crowded, thriving oasis of life on the empty floor of the deep, fed by one great gift from the world above. And it lasts not for days, but for years. A single whale fall can sustain a flourishing community of deep-sea life for decades, slowly being taken apart and turned back into life, until at last only the bare bones remain. And then even those are gone, and the floor of the deep returns once more to its patient dark and its gentle falling snow. Think of that as you drift. Even the death of the greatest creature in the ocean becomes, in the deep, a long, slow festival of life, a gift that arrives out of the dark and feeds a whole hidden world for years. Nothing is wasted down here. Nothing is truly lost. Everything that falls is gathered in, and used, and turned, patiently and without haste, back into the living dark. And there is one more source of food in the deep, the strangest of all, and the one that overturned, more than any other discovery, our entire idea of what life needs to exist. For everything we have spoken of so far still traces back, in the end, to the sun. The marine snow and the whale fall are both, at root, sunlight, captured at the surface and carried down into the dark. But in certain places on the floor of the deep ocean, there is life that owes nothing to the sun at all. Life that feeds, instead, on the raw chemistry of the planet itself. In places where the Earth's hot interior comes close to the seafloor, scalding, mineral-rich water comes pouring up out of cracks and chimneys in the ocean floor, the hydrothermal vents, the scientists call them, and the cold seeps, where chemicals leak slowly up from below. And clustered around these vents, in the deep dark, thrives some of the densest and most astonishing life in the entire ocean. Great gardens of giant tube worms, pale and red-tipped, swaying in the chemical-laden water, thick beds of strange clams and mussels, blind shrimp swarming in their thousands over the hot stone. None of it eats sunlight. None of it eats marine snow. Instead, at the very bottom of this food chain, are bacteria that have learned to make food directly out of the chemicals streaming up from inside the earth, drawing their energy not from the sun, but from the planet's own hot breath. It is an entire world of life running on the chemistry of the deep, utterly independent of the sun, thriving in the dark around these scattered oases of warmth on the cold floor of the sea. When we first found these vent communities, only a few decades ago, they changed everything. For they proved that life does not, after all, require sunlight. It requires only energy, in some usable form, and a little chemistry, and given those, it will arise and cling and flourish, even in the most impossible-seeming places. It is one of the reasons that, when we now look up at the icy moons of the outer planets at worlds with dark oceans hidden beneath shells of ice, far from any warming sun, we no longer assume those oceans must be dead, because we have seen, here, on our own seafloor, life thriving in just such conditions, in darkness, in cold, in crushing pressure, fed by nothing but the chemistry of the rock. The deep sea taught us that life is far tougher and far more inventive and far more at home in the dark than we had ever dared to believe. Let that thought settle gently into you. The same dark, cold, crushing conditions that we once thought made life impossible turn out to be conditions in which life not only survives, but flourishes, conditions that may, even now, be cradling living things in the dark oceans of distant worlds. The deep is not the edge of life. It may be closer to the heart of it. Life began, some believe, in just such places in the warm chemical dark of the deep sea floor, far from the sun, billions of years ago, which would mean that this place we are sinking toward tonight, this crushing, lightless abyss, is not the strange far edge of the living world at all. It may be the oldest home life ever had, the place we all, in the very deepest sense, came from. Breathe slowly. We are nearly at the bottom now. The walls of the trench have fallen away into the dark on every side, and below us, not far now, lies the floor, the lowest place on the surface of the earth, waiting in the silent dark exactly as it has for longer than there have been creatures to wonder about it. But before we settle onto that final floor, let us hover here a while, in the dark above the bottom of the world, and consider just how little of this place we have ever truly seen. Because the strangest fact about the deep ocean is not the pressure, or the cold, or the creatures. It is this, that almost all of it, even now, remains entirely unknown. We are used to thinking of our planet as thoroughly explored. The age of discovery is over, we tell ourselves. The maps are filled in. There are no blank spaces left. And on land, that is nearly true. We have walked, charted, photographed, and mapped very nearly every corner of the continents. From space, we can watch a single car move along a road on the far side of the world. There is precious little of the dry land left that any human being has not, in some fashion, seen. But the dry land is less than a third of the surface of the planet. The rest, most of our world, the great majority of it, is ocean. And the ocean, below its thin, sunlit skin, is very nearly a blank. Consider this, and let it astonish you properly. We have mapped the entire surface of the moon in fine detail, every crater, every mountain, every valley of a world 250,000 miles away. We have mapped the surface of Mars, a planet so distant that its light takes minutes to reach us, well enough to pick out features the size of a house. We have detailed maps of Venus, hidden beneath its clouds, and of the moons of Jupiter and Saturn, worlds we have never touched. And yet the floor of our own ocean, the solid bottom of the sea, here on our own planet, beneath our own ships, has been mapped in that kind of detail for only a small fraction of its area. The rest, the great majority of the seafloor of our own world, has never been mapped in any real detail at all. We have better maps of the surfaces of other planets than we have of the bottom of our own sea. How can that be? How can we have charted distant worlds and left our own ocean floor a blank? The answer comes back, once again, to that great wall of water. From space, mapping a planet is in some ways easy. Light and radio waves travel freely through the emptiness, and a spacecraft in orbit can scan the whole surface below it, sweeping back and forth, building up a complete picture over time. But water blocks all of that. You cannot see the seafloor from a satellite. The ocean is opaque to ordinary light long before you reach any real depth, and utterly black far above the bottom. To map the deep seafloor, you cannot scan it from afar. You have to go there to send a ship across the actual patch of ocean above it, dragging instruments that bounce sound off the bottom and listen for the echo, building the map up slowly, one narrow strip of seafloor at a time, as the ship crawls back and forth across the vastness of the sea. And the ocean is so enormous, and the ships so few, and the work so slow, that after all our centuries of seafaring, most of the bottom of the sea has simply never had a ship pass over it with the right instruments running. It is not that we have looked and found nothing. It is that, across most of the deep ocean floor, we have never truly looked at all. There is a great effort underway now to change this, an international project with the goal of finally producing a complete, detailed map of the entire ocean floor, ship by ship and strip by strip, within our own lifetimes. It is a vast undertaking, and a noble one, and year by year the blank spaces shrink a little. But the task is so enormous that even now, with all our technology, the majority of the deep seafloor remains unmapped in real detail, a hidden landscape the size of all the continents combined, lying in the dark beneath the waves, its mountains and valleys and plains and trenches still uncharted, still unseen, still genuinely unknown. Think about what that truly means. It means that the single largest unexplored region in the known universe that we could actually reach is not on Mars, or the Moon, or some distant world. It is here. It is beneath the sea on our own planet. There are mountain ranges down there, in the dark, that no human eye has ever seen, and no map has ever shown undersea peaks rising kilometers from the ocean floor. Whole ranges of them, entirely uncharted. There are valleys and canyons greater than any on land, hidden in the black. There are almost certainly creatures down there, many of them, perhaps most of them that no human being has ever glimpsed, living out their lives in parts of the deep that no light from our world has ever reached. Every single time we send a vehicle down into a new part of the deep sea, we find things we have never seen before. New creatures, new landscapes, new mysteries. Not occasionally, not now and then, nearly every time. The deep is so little explored that discovery there is not rare but routine, the ordinary, expected result of simply going and looking. We live, in other words, on a planet we have barely explored. The great age of discovery is not over. It has hardly begun. It has simply moved from the surface of the land, down into the dark of the sea, into the deepest, quietest, least known place there is, the place we are drifting through tonight. And out of that vast unknown dark, every so often, comes something we cannot explain. Which brings us to one of the strangest chapters in the whole story of the deep, the sounds. The deep ocean is not silent. That is one of the first things that surprises people. We imagine the bottom of the sea as a place of perfect, dead quiet, but in fact, sound travels extraordinarily well through water, far better and far further than through air, and the deep ocean is full of it. There is the groan and grind of the moving plates of the Earth's crust, the distant rumble of undersea earthquakes, the slow boom of shifting ice in the polar seas, carrying for thousands of kilometers through the deep, the calls of whales, which can travel across entire ocean basins. The deep is alive with sound, an endless low chorus of the planet talking to itself in the dark, and for decades, we have lowered sensitive instruments into it to listen, and every so often, those instruments have caught something that no one could explain. The most famous of all came from the deep Pacific. In the 1990s, instruments listening to the ocean recorded an enormously powerful low-frequency sound, a strange, rising sound, picked up by sensors thousands of kilometers apart, far louder than any known animal could possibly produce. It was given a name that has since become almost legendary, the bloop. And for years, no one could say for certain what had made it. It was too loud, it seemed, to be a creature, and yet its character, the way it rose and changed, was oddly biological, oddly like the call of some living thing. The mystery caught the public imagination as few things from the deep ever have. What could be large enough, down there in the dark, to make a sound louder than a whale, louder than almost anything alive? The unknown deep, it seemed, might be hiding something vast. In time, with more instruments and better understanding, scientists came to a quieter answer. The bloop, they concluded, was almost certainly not a creature at all, but the sound of ice, the immense, grinding crack of a great iceberg breaking apart and scraping along the seafloor, far away in the cold southern ocean, its sound carrying for thousands of kilometers through the deep. A natural sound, after all, not a monster. The cracking of the ice at the bottom of the world. And yet, and this is the part worth holding on to even now, not every sound from the deep has an answer. The instruments listening in the dark still catch things, now and then, that no one can fully explain. Strange calls, odd rhythms, sounds that do not match any known creature or any known process, rising out of the unmapped dark and then falling silent again. Most, in time, will surely turn out to have ordinary explanations, ice and earthquakes, and the movements of the sea, and the calls of animals we simply have not yet identified, but some are still, for now, genuinely unexplained. There are sounds coming out of the deep ocean, right now, that we have recorded and studied, and still cannot name. In the largest unexplored space on the planet, something, sometimes, is making a noise we do not understand. There is no need to find that frightening. Quite the opposite. It is one of the last places left where genuine mystery still lives, where the honest answer to the question, what was that, is still, sometimes, simply, we do not know. In a world that can feel entirely mapped, entirely explained, entirely used up, the deep ocean still holds real unknowns, still surprises us, still keeps its secrets. The strange sounds in the dark are not a threat. They are a a reminder that we share our planet with a vast, ancient, living dark that we have barely begun to understand, and that still, after all our cleverness, has the power to make us wonder. Let yourself wonder at it now, gently as you drift. Somewhere far below you and all around you, in water no one has ever seen, the deep is going about its ancient life, groaning and singing and cracking and calling in the dark, in a language we have only just begun to learn to hear, and most of it, still, we do not understand. And that is not a lack, that is a gift. There are still mysteries in the world. There is still somewhere left to wonder about, and it is here, in the quiet dark, at the bottom of our own sea. There is one more thing the explorers have found at the bottom of the trench, and it is worth speaking of gently, because it is the strangest discovery of all, not because it is exotic, but because it is so familiar. When James Cameron reached the bottom of the Challenger Deep, and when the explorers who followed him sank down to that same floor at the very bottom of the world, they went expecting to find the rarest and most untouched place on the entire planet, a place so remote, so impossibly deep, so utterly cut off from the world above, that surely no trace of human life could ever have reached it. And in the fine, pale sediment at the bottom of the deepest trench on Earth, in the most isolated place a human being has ever traveled, they found, among other things, our litter. A plastic bag, the traces of the things we make and throw away, carried somehow, over years, all the way down to the deepest floor of the sea. It is a quiet, sobering discovery, and there is no need to dwell on it darkly tonight. But it is worth holding for a moment, because it completes the picture in an unexpected way. We have spent this whole night marveling at how remote the deep is, how few have been there, how little we know of it, how cut off it seems from our bright, busy world above. And yet it turns out that even there, even at the very bottom of the deepest place on Earth, our world has already left its mark. The deep is not, after all, entirely separate from us. It is joined to us by the falling snow, by the sinking whales, and, it turns out, by the things we let slip into the sea. The bottom of the world is closer to our own lives than we ever imagined, and perhaps that is a reason, in the end, to care for it, this vast, ancient, living dark that we are only beginning to know and have already, without meaning to, begun to touch. But set that gently aside now. For the deep, despite everything, remains overwhelmingly wild, overwhelmingly unknown, overwhelmingly itself. A scrap of plastic on the floor of the trench is a small thing against the immensity of all that dark, living water, almost none of which any human being has ever seen. And the great truth of the deep is not how much of it we have touched. It is how much of it still waits. Because that is what the explorers say, every one of them, when they come back up into the light. Not that the deep is known now, or finished, or understood. They say the opposite. They say that every time we go down, we find something new. That for every creature we have named, there are surely many more we have never seen. That the deep sea is so vast and so little explored that we have almost certainly not yet found its largest inhabitants, or its strangest, or its most wonderful. The things we have glimpsed, the giant amphipods, the delicate snailfish, the great gentle sea cucumbers drifting across the mud, the gardens of life around the vents, these are not the deep's last secrets. They are the very first ones. The merest edge of a hidden world whose true contents we can still only guess at. Think back, if you remember it, to the great mystery of the giant squid, the creature we feared and doubted and denied for 2,000 years before we finally saw it alive, only a few times, for a few minutes each. In the dark, deep water it calls home. That is not a story about one strange animal. It is a story about the whole deep ocean and about us. For 2,000 years, the largest invertebrate on the planet, a creature with the biggest eyes of any animal that has ever lived, hid from us in the dark of the deep, and we could not find it, could not photograph it, could not prove it was real until almost our own time. And if a creature that large could stay hidden for so long, in our own ocean, on our own world, what else is down there, still, that we have never seen? How many more great mysteries are drifting in the dark right now, in the unmapped deep, waiting, as the squid waited for us to finally learn how to look? The honest answer is that we do not know. And that, when you let it settle, is one of the most wonderful thoughts there is. We live on a planet that still has genuine secrets, real, large, living secrets, hidden in a dark we have barely entered. The deep ocean is not a closed book. It is a book we have read only the first page of, and the rest of it, all the vast, dark, wonderful rest of it, is still out there in the black water, waiting, patient, unhurried, exactly as it has been for hundreds of millions of years, to be discovered by those who come after us with the courage and the curiosity to go down and see. For now, let us simply rest in the knowing that it is there, that below the bright, thin skin of the world we know, there is this other world, vast and cold and dark and alive, full of creatures we have met and creatures we never will, fed by a gentle, endless snowfall of light turned to darkness, lit here and there by the cold blue sparks of living things, and stretching down and down and down, far below every storm and every sound, to the silent floor at the very bottom of everything. And it is to that floor, at last, that we are now ready to descend. Let your breathing slow. Let the last of the day's thoughts drift away from you, like marine snow falling softly into the dark. There is nothing left to understand tonight, nothing left to solve. We have come a long way down together, through every layer of the sea, and there is only one short journey left to make the last, gentle fall to the very bottom of the world, and then the quiet, and then sleep. Let us make it slowly. As we make that final descent, let us think slowly, gently, in no hurry at all about how this place came to be. For the trench beneath us is not simply a deep spot in the sea, it is one of the great machines of the living planet. And the story of how it was made is the story of the Earth itself, working on a scale of time so vast that it can carry the mind softly towards sleep, simply to contemplate it. The outer shell of our planet is not a single solid skin. It is broken into great pieces, vast slabs of rock, the tectonic plates, that carry the continents and the ocean floors upon their backs. And these plates are not still. They move. Not quickly, no faster than your fingernails grow, a few centimeters a year, so slowly that no human eye could ever watch it happen. But they move, ceaselessly, driven by the slow heat of the planet's deep interior, drifting across the face of the Earth over millions and tens of millions of years, carrying whole oceans and continents with them, colliding, grinding, pulling apart, in a dance so slow and so enormous that a single step of it takes longer than our entire species has existed. And where two of these great plates meet, sometimes one is pushed beneath the other. The heavier plate, usually the dense rock of an ocean floor, bends downward at the meeting place and begins, over countless ages, to slide down beneath its neighbor, sinking slowly back into the hot, deep interior of the Earth from which it once came. The scientists call this subduction. And the bend in the seafloor where it happens, the place where one plate tips down and begins its long descent into the depths of the planet, is a trench. That is what the Mariana Trench is. It is the place where the floor of the Western Pacific is bending down and sliding, with infinite slowness, back into the body of the Earth. The deepest place on the surface of the world is, in truth, a doorway, the slow, vast, grinding seam where the floor of the ocean returns into the planet to be remade. There is something almost unbearably peaceful in that thought, if you let it unfold slowly. The seafloor itself is not permanent. Over the great ages of the Earth, new ocean floor is born at the undersea ridges, where molten rock rises and cools, and old ocean floor is swallowed down again at the trenches, sinking back into the deep to be melted and remade. The whole floor of the sea is, on the scale of deep time, a slow river of stone, born at the ridges, drifting across the world over 100 million years, and finally sinking back into the Earth at the trenches, a vast, patient, endless cycle of rock, turning over and over across spans of time so immense that our own lives, our whole history, the entire age of our species, is less than the blink of an eye against it. The trench beneath us has been here, doing this slow work for tens of millions of years. It will go on doing it for tens of millions more, long after everything we know has passed away. There is a deep and steadying calm in the sheer, untroubled slowness of the planet, going about its ancient business in the dark, on a scale of time that makes all of our hurry and worry seem very small and very far away. And this slow grinding of the plates does something strange and wonderful here in the Mariana, something found in only a few places on Earth. As the descending plate bends and sinks, it squeezes water and minerals up through the rock above it, and in places along the trench, this gives rise to a kind of feature found almost nowhere else. Great mounds on the seafloor were cold, mineral-laden mud wells slowly up from deep inside the planet, building strange, muddy hills on the floor of the sea. The fluid that rises through them is unlike almost anything else in the ocean, strongly alkaline, rich with the chemistry of the deep rock, seeping up from kilometers down inside the Earth. And clustered around these slow, cold seeps, in conditions that would seem utterly hostile. Life persists once again, strange microbes making their living from the deep chemistry, thriving in fluids so unusual that scientists study it for clues about how life itself might first have begun, here or on other worlds, in just such dark, chemical, deep-sea places billions of years ago. So the deepest place on Earth is not only the most extreme, it may also be among the most ancient and the most important, a window into the deep machinery of the planet, a place where the floor of the world returns into the Earth, where strange chemistry wells up from far below, and where life clings on in conditions that may echo the very circumstances in which life first arose. We came down here tonight thinking of the trench as the lowest, darkest, emptiest place there is. It turns out to be something closer to a beginning, a source, a deep, slow, patient heart of the living planet, beating once every 100 million years. Let that vastness of time settle over you now, soft and slow, as we make the last of our descent. There is no hurry anywhere in the deep. The plates move a few centimeters a year. The marine snow drifts down for hours to reach the bottom. The whale falls feed the dark for decades. The seafloor takes 100 million years to complete its slow journey from the ridge to the trench. Everything here is slow and patient and unhurried and ancient beyond imagining. And tonight, you can let yourself move at the pace of the deep, slowing, settling, sinking, letting go of every hurry and every urgency of the bright, fast world above, until your breathing matches the slow rhythm of the falling snow, and your thoughts drift as gently as the creatures in the dark. We are almost there now. The floor of the Challenger Deep is just below us. Let us go down to it, slowly, and let it be the last thing we see before sleep. And there is one more thing to understand about the deep. Before we make the last of our descent, something that makes the whole story stranger and lonelier and more wonderful than a single trench could ever be. For the Mariana is the deepest place on Earth, but it is not the only place like it. It is merely the deepest of many. The very deepest layer of the ocean, the Haddle Zone, the realm below 6 kilometers, named for the old underworld because it lies deeper than anything else has a name for, is not one place. It is scattered, all around the world, wherever the great plates of the Earth bend down and slide beneath one another. The seafloor is pulled down into a trench, and at the bottom of each of those trenches lies a small pocket of that deepest, darkest water. There are around 24 of these great trenches scattered across the floors of the world's oceans, 24 separate pockets of the deepest sea, most of them in the vast Pacific, ringing it like a string of hidden wells around the edges of that enormous ocean. The Mariana is the deepest of them, but it is far from alone, and here is the strange and beautiful thing about them. Because these deepest pockets are separated from one another by great stretches of shallower seafloor, by ridges and rises and plains that lie kilometers above the trench bottoms, the creatures that live in the very deepest water of each trench are, in a sense, marooned. A snailfish that has adapted to the crushing pressure of one trench cannot easily cross the shallower, warmer, lower pressure water between the trenches to reach another. And so each trench becomes a kind of island, not an island of land rising out of the sea, but an island of depth sunk into it, an isolated pocket of the deepest dark, cut off from all the others by the ordinary ocean in between. The scientists have come to think of the Haddle trenches almost the way they think of remote islands on the surface, as separate, isolated worlds, each one evolving its own life in its own deep dark, apart from all the rest. Think of what that means. It means that the snailfish of one trench may be a different kind from the snailfish of another, each having evolved separately in its own deep isolation, to fit its own particular pocket of the abyss. It means that each of these 24 deepest places may hold creatures found nowhere else on Earth, its own unique life, shaped in its own dark, separated from every other deep by the impassable shallows between. It means the deepest ocean is not a single uniform realm, but an archipelago of hidden worlds, scattered across the floors of the seas, each one dark and cold and crushing and alive, each one almost entirely unexplored, each one keeping its own particular secrets in its own particular dark. Let us drift, gently, in our minds, from one to another of them, the way one might drift in a dream from island to island across a dark and quiet sea. Far to the southeast of the Mariana lies the Tonga Trench, in the South Pacific, the second deepest place in all the oceans, plunging down very nearly as far as the Challenger Deep itself. It is one of the fastest moving trenches on the planet, where the seafloor is being pulled down into the earth more quickly than almost anywhere else, and at its bottom lies its own pocket of the deepest dark, its own isolated world, only barely explored, holding who knows what. Nearby runs the Mariana Trench, stretching down toward New Zealand, another of the great deeps of the southern Pacific, where some of the most remarkable studies of deep-sea life have been made, where the swarming amphipods and the pale snailfish have been filmed, going about their lives, kilometers down in the dark, each kind subtly its own, fitted to its own trench. Far to the north, off the coast of Japan, lie the trenches of the northwestern Pacific, deep, cold, ancient furrows in the seafloor, among the most studied of all the world's deeps, and yet still, in their deepest reaches, barely known. It was in one of these northern trenches that cameras recently captured the deepest fish ever filmed alive, a small pale snailfish, drifting calmly along the bottom more than 8 kilometers down, deeper than any fish had ever before been seen, right at the very edge of where the scientists believe a fish can possibly survive. A small, soft creature, glimpsed for a few moments in the cold beam of a camera, at a depth that had been thought beyond the reach of any fish at all, and then gone again, back into its dark, leaving us to wonder how many more like it drift, unseen, in the deepest water of all the world's trenches. Out of the Pacific entirely, in the warm Atlantic, lies the Puerto Rico Trench, the deepest place in all the Atlantic Ocean. A long, dark furrow north of the Caribbean, plunging down more than 8 kilometers into a darkness as complete as any in the world. And far to the south, ringing the cold seas around Antarctica, lies the South Sandwich Trench, the deepest place in the entire Southern Ocean, a remote and frigid deep at the very bottom of the world, among the least visited places on the whole planet. And in the Indian Ocean, off the islands of Indonesia, the long Java Trench falls away into the deepest dark of that ocean too, another isolated pocket of the abyss, another hidden world, another small, unexplored deep keeping its own quiet secrets in the dark. Each of these is its own Challenger Deep in miniature, its own pocket of crushing, lightless, frozen water, its own soft, pale floor settling slowly under the falling snow, its own swarming amphipods and drifting snailfish and gentle grazing creatures of the dark, its own complete and isolated living world, cut off from all the others, almost entirely unknown to us. And there are around 24 of them, scattered across the floors of all the oceans of the earth, 24 hidden deeps, 24 dark islands sunk into the sea, 24 separate worlds of perpetual night, almost none of which any human being has ever truly explored. It deepens the wonder, somehow, to know that the Mariana is not alone, that the deepest dark is not a single strange exception, but a whole scattered archipelago of hidden worlds ringing the planet, each one alive, each one ancient, each one waiting in the cold and the dark for someone, someday, to come down and see what it holds. We have stood for a few minutes each, at the bottom of one or two of them. The rest, the great majority of the deepest places on our own planet remain, even now, almost completely unknown. Whole worlds, sunk into our own ocean, waiting in the dark. Let that gentle vastness settle over you as we turn, at last, back toward the floor of the Challenger Deep and the end of our descent. There is so much down here, so many hidden worlds, so much dark, patient, living water that no one has ever seen, and there is no need to see it all tonight. It is enough, for now, simply to know that it is there scattered across the floors of all the seas, dark and cold and alive and unhurried, keeping its ancient quiet, whether or not anyone is awake to wonder at it. But on the way down to that final floor, let us slow once more and turn our attention to something we passed by earlier and promised to return to the lights. The cold blue sparks that began to appear all around us as the sunlight failed, far above, at the lower edge of the twilight zone. We called them, then, a scattering of living stars. Now, drifting gently down through the great dark middle of the sea, let us finally understand them, for they are one of the most beautiful and most common wonders in all the ocean, and almost no one who lives on the surface has ever seen them. The making of light by a living thing is called bioluminescence, and in the deep sea it is not rare. It is the rule. Down here, in the vast dark middle layers of the ocean, the largest living space on the planet, the great majority of creatures can make their own light. Not most of some special few, most of nearly all of them. The deep ocean is, by a wide margin, the most luminous place on Earth, a vast dark realm filled, almost everywhere, with living creatures gently glowing in the black. If you could see it all at once, the deep sea would not look dark at all. It would look like a night sky turned liquid, and brought close sparks and glows and slow pulses of cold blue light, scattered through the water in every direction, as far as the eye could follow. The light is almost always blue. There is a reason for that, and it is a gentle one. Blue light travels furthest through seawater, and so, over countless ages, the creatures of the deep have nearly all settled on blue as the color of their light, the better to be seen, or to see, across the dark. It is a cold light, and a soft one. Made not by heat, there is no warmth in it at all, but by a quiet chemistry inside the creature's own body, a reaction that turns the energy of life directly into light, with almost none of it wasted as heat. It is the most efficient light in the world. A living thing in the deep can glow, softly and steadily, for as long as it needs to, at almost no cost at all. And what do they use it for? Everything. The uses of light in the deep are as varied as the creatures that make it, and nearly all of them are quietly wonderful. Some creatures glow to find one another in the vast dark, for in a place so enormous and so black, a soft light is the surest way to call to your own kind across the emptiness, a beacon of belonging in the dark. Some glow to lure their prey, dangling a small bright light before them like a lantern, so that smaller creatures, drawn to it as moths are drawn to a flame, swim close enough to be caught. Some flash suddenly, in a burst of brilliant light, to startle and blind an attacker, and vanish into the dark while it is dazzled. Some release clouds of glowing particles into the water, a shining smokescreen, and slip away behind it. And some, and this is perhaps the most elegant trick in the entire sea, use their light not to be seen, but to disappear. Think of a creature in the dim upper twilight, where a faint trace of light still falls from the surface far above, to a hunter swimming below it. Looking up, that creature would show as a dark shape against the faintly glowing water, a shadow, a silhouette, an easy target. And so, over the ages, many of the creatures of the twilight have learned a beautiful defense. They glow, softly, on their undersides, with exactly the color and brightness of the faint light coming down from above, and in doing so, they erase their own shadow. They blend perfectly into the glow behind them, lit from below to match the light from above, until they simply vanish from the sight of anything looking up. They make light, in other words, in order to become invisible. There is a kind of quiet genius in that, worked out over millions of years in the dark, and it is happening right now, all through the twilight of every ocean on Earth, countless creatures glowing gently to erase themselves, hiding in plain sight by the soft light of their own bodies. So those cold blue sparks we passed on the way down were not strange and lonely lights in an empty dark. They were the ordinary language of the deep creatures calling to their kind, luring their prey, startling their enemies, and quietly making themselves disappear, all by the gentle light they carry within them. The deep is not a dark and silent void after all. It is a vast, slow, glowing conversation, carried on in points of cold blue light across the largest living space on the planet, every night, every day, forever, entirely without us. Let us drift down a little further through that glowing dark and meet a few of the gentle creatures who live in it. Here, drifting in the black, is one of the loveliest of them all, a small, pale octopus, unlike any octopus you have ever seen at the surface. It does not jet about or wrestle with crabs in a tide pool. It hovers, calmly, in the deep open water, and on either side of its soft round body are two wide, rounded fins that it flaps, slowly and gently, exactly like a pair of small ears, so that it seems, for all the world, and to be flying through the dark on flapping ears, like something out of a child's dream. The scientists named it after a flying elephant from an old story, and the name fits perfectly. It is among the deepest living of all octopuses, found further down than almost any other, and it is utterly gentle, a soft, slow, pale, wide-eyed creature, flapping its little fins in the cold dark, drifting through the deep with a kind of dreamy, unhurried calm that seems to belong to sleep itself. Picture it now, hovering in the black water near you, flapping gently, turning its large, soft eyes toward your light, entirely unafraid. There is nothing in the like this life. There is nothing in the deep more peaceful to keep company with as you drift toward sleep. And here, further down, is a creature that legend has made into a monster, but that is, in truth, simply another of the deep's quiet survivors. A small, dark fish with a great mouth and, rising from its head, a slender stalk that ends in a single glowing lure, a little blue light, held out before it in the dark. We have made it fearsome, in stories and in films, and given it sharp teeth and a terrible name. But seen plainly, in its own world, it is something stranger and gentler than a monster. It is a small fish in an enormous dark, holding out a tiny light, waiting, patiently, in the cold, for the rare chance of a meal to drift close. In the deep, Where food is scarce and the dark is vast, it cannot afford to chase. So it waits, and glows, and hopes a small patient lantern-bearer in the black, doing nothing more sinister than trying, like everything else down here, simply to live. There is no horror in it, once you set the old stories aside. There is only another creature, beautifully suited to a hard place, going quietly about the work of survival in the dark. And all around these, in the great, dark middle water, drift countless others, delicate jellyfish pulsing with soft internal light, trailing long, fine tendrils through the black, long chains of tiny creatures linked together into glowing ropes that stretch for many meters through the dark. Transparent animals you could hold up to the light and see clean through, their hearts and their glowing organs visible within them like jewels in glass. Slow drifting siphonophores, some of the longest creatures on the planet, hanging in the water like delicate luminous threads, longer than a whale. The deep midwater is not empty. It is one of the richest, strangest, most delicate galleries of life anywhere on Earth. A slow, glowing, drifting menagerie of the gentlest and most beautiful creatures imaginable, almost none of which any person on the surface will ever see. Let them drift past you now, one by one, in the soft, dark, as your own thoughts begin to drift and soften. The glowing jellyfish, pulsing slowly. The little flying octopus, flapping its gentle fins. The patient lanternfish with its small blue light. The long, luminous threads hanging in the black. All of them calm, all of them gentle, all of them perfectly at home in the cold, dark water, drifting, glowing, unhurried, asking nothing of you at all. There is nothing here to fear. There is only the soft, cold light, and the gentle, drifting creatures, and the slow, slow fall toward the bottom of the world. And now, at last, we arrive. The descent slows. The great dark, which has held us for so long, begins, almost imperceptibly, to give way to something solid below. Out of the endless black beneath us, in the soft pool of our light, a shape resolves flat, pale, and still. The floor. The bottom of the Challenger Deep. The lowest point on the surface of the Earth. We have come all the way down, through every layer of the sea, and here, at the very end of the world's longest fall, is the floor itself, waiting in the dark exactly as it has for longer than there have been creatures anywhere to wonder about it. Let yourself settle toward it, slowly, the way a single flake of marine snow settles, taking its time, in no hurry at all. The floor of the trench is not rock, not here. It is sediment fine, pale, soft sediment, built up grain by grain over millions of years from the endless gentle snowfall of the world above. It is the softest floor imaginable, a deep cushion of fine pale dust that has been settling, undisturbed, for longer than we can truly grasp. When the explorers' vessels touched down here, they raised slow, silent clouds of it, drifting up around them like smoke, and then settling again, with infinite gentleness, back to the bottom. Nothing hurries here, nothing is sharp, everything is soft and slow and still, and it is quiet. More quiet than anywhere you have ever been. The surface world, even at its most peaceful, is full of sound, the hum of distant traffic, the wind, the small sounds of a house at night, the rhythm of your own ordinary life. Here there is none of it. Here there is only the vast, soft, total silence of the deep, a silence kilometers thick, pressing in gently on every side, older and deeper than any quiet you have ever known. The whole loud, bright, hurrying world is nearly 11 kilometers straight up over your head, as remote as the stars, and not one whisper of it reaches down to this soft, pale floor at the bottom of everything. There is only the dark, and the silence, and the gentle settling of the snow. Let your light play slowly across the bottom. There a faint trail in the soft sediment, the slow track of some creature that passed this way. There the pale shape of a sea cucumber, drifting just above the floor on its translucent body, grazing the fine mud for the traces of food it holds. And there, just at the edge of the light, hovering calm and unbothered above the bottom of the world, a small, pale, soft-bodied fish, drifting gently on rippling fins, its large, dark eyes turned without fear toward the strange glow that has come down into its dark. The snailfish, the deepest fish on Earth. Here, at the very bottom, exactly where it has always lived, perfectly at home in the most extreme place there is calm, gentle, unhurried, going quietly about its small life in the dark, as it has for longer than our whole species has existed. This is the bottom of the world, and it is not a place of horror, or emptiness, or dread. It is a place of profound, ancient, gentle peace. A soft, pale floor, in a vast, soft silence, under a sky of cold blue living stars, where delicate creatures drift unafraid through water that has never known the sun. The deepest, darkest, most crushing place on the entire planet turns out to be, in the end, one of the most peaceful places imaginable, still, and quiet, and ancient, and calm, far below every storm and every sound, asking nothing, troubling no one, simply being, exactly as it has always been. Remember the thought we began with, all the way up at the bright surface, hours ago now, that more human beings have walked on the moon than have ever come to this place. We have spent this night closing that impossible distance, sinking together all the way from the warm sunlit waves to this soft, silent floor at the bottom of the deepest trench on Earth. And what we have found here, at the end of the longest descent in the world, is not what the old fears promised. Not a dead and empty desert, not a place of monsters, but a living world, vast and dark and gentle, full of patient, beautiful creatures perfectly at home in the deep, fed by the soft falling snow of the world above, lit by the cold blue light of life itself, and held in a silence so deep and so old that simply to rest in it is to feel every hurry and every worry of the bright world above grow faint and far away, and finally let go. There is a quiet lesson in having come all this way, worth carrying down with you into sleep, the same lesson the great squid taught us. Surfacing one last time, we are so used, now, to knowing things. We have mapped the moon and the planets, read the light of distant stars, reached out across the void of space to worlds we will never touch. We have grown very certain that the age of discovery is behind us, that the world holds no more true unknowns. And yet here, in our own ocean, on our own quiet planet, closer to you tonight than almost anywhere you could name, lies the largest unexplored place we can reach, vast, dark, alive, and very nearly unknown, keeping the better part of itself, still, after everything, gently to itself. The last great mystery is not out across the cold of space. It is here, in the dark, soft water at the bottom of our own world, and it will still be here, patient and unhurried and full of secrets, long after you have closed your eyes tonight, and for 10,000 quiet nights to come. You do not need to solve it tonight. You do not need to reach the bottom of anything. You have already come all the way down, as far as there is to go, to the soft, silent floor at the very end of the world, and there is nothing left now to do but rest. So, let yourself rest. Let the soft, pale floor of the deep be the floor beneath your own drifting thoughts. Let the vast, ancient silence of the trench become the silence of your own quiet mind. There is nothing above you but kilometers of calm, dark water holding you gently on every side. There is nothing below you but the soft, patient floor at the bottom of the world. And there is nothing you need to do, nothing you need to find, nothing you need to keep watch over, anywhere, tonight. So let us stay here a while, together, at the bottom of the world, and let everything grow slow. Feel how still it is. The water does not move. The light from above is long gone, kilometers behind us now, and the only glow is the soft, cold blue of the living things that drift. Here and there, in the dark, a slow pulse of light from a passing jellyfish. A faint spark far off in the black, the gentle lantern of some patient creature waiting in the cold. They are not troubled by your presence. They drift on, slowly, as they always have, glowing softly, asking nothing, and you can let yourself drift with them now, weightless in the dark, held on every side by the gentle, enormous calm of the deep. There is no weight here, not for you. The crushing pressure that shapes this place, that would close a steel sphere in an instant, presses on the creatures of the deep so evenly, from every side at once, that they do not feel it at all, and tonight, neither do you. It does not press down on you. It holds you. It cradles you, softly and completely, from every direction, the way deep water holds anything that has learned to belong to it. You are not falling now. You are floating, suspended, weightless and at ease, in the soft, cold dark at the bottom of the world, held gently in place by the whole vast patient body of the sea. Let your breathing slow to match the slowness of this place. Breathe in, slowly, like the long, slow fall of a single flake of snow drifting down through the dark. And breathe out, slowly, like that same flake settling, at last, with infinite gentleness, onto the soft, pale floor. In, like the slow drift down. Out, like the soft settling. There is no hurry in the deep. There is no hurry anywhere here. Let each breath grow a little longer, a little slower, a little softer than the one before, until your breathing is as slow and as patient and as untroubled as the deep itself. And let the snow keep falling gently all around you, the soft, pale flakes of marine snow drifting down through the dark, glittering for a moment as they pass through the faint light, and then gone, settling softly to the floor. They have been falling for millions of years, and they are falling now, and they will go on falling long after this night is over. A slow, soft, endless snowfall in the dark, asking nothing of you, needing nothing from you, simply drifting down and softly down. Let them carry your thoughts down with them. Each drifting thought, each small worry of the day, each lingering bit of the bright, loud world above, let it become a single soft flake of snow, and let it drift gently down, away from you, into the dark, and settle softly to the floor far below, and be still. There is nothing to keep hold of tonight, nothing to carry, nothing to solve or to finish or to fear. The deep will keep its mysteries without you. The slow plates of the earth will go on grinding their patient way back into the planet, a few soft centimeters a year, without your watching. The snow will go on falling. The creatures will go on glowing, softly, in the dark. The trench will go on being the deepest, quietest, most ancient place on earth, exactly as it has for tens of millions of years, whether or not anyone is awake to know it. You can let go of all of it. You can set it all down, softly, like a flake of snow settling to the floor, and simply rest. Picture the deep water all around you, cool and dark and calm and infinitely gentle, far below every storm, far below every sound, far below the reach of the sun, the reach of the wind, the reach of every hurried, worried, noisy thing in all the world above. There is only the soft, dark water holding you, only the slow blue lights drifting far off in the black, only the gentle falling snow settling softly to the floor, only the vast, ancient, patient silence of the deep wrapping around you like the softest blanket there has ever been. And somewhere near you, in that soft dark, the small, pale snailfish drifts on, calm and unhurried, going quietly about its gentle life at the bottom of the world, unafraid, untroubled, perfectly at home in the deepest, darkest, most peaceful place on earth. Let it be your companion now, as you drift towards sleep, a small, soft, gentle living thing, at perfect peace in the deep dark, asking nothing, fearing nothing, simply drifting, calm and slow, through the quiet water it was made for. You are made for rest the way the snailfish is made for the deep. Tonight, you belong to the quiet exactly as it belongs to the dark. So let yourself sink the last small distance, softly, into sleep down past the last of your waking thoughts, the way we sank past the last of the light, into a place that is dark and gentle and deep and entirely at peace. There is nowhere else you need to be. There is nothing else you need to do. The long descent is over. We have come all the way down, together, from the bright, warm surface to the soft, dark floor at the bottom of the world, and the journey is complete. All that is left now is to rest here, in the deep, in the quiet, for as long as you like, and to let sleep come, as gently and as surely as the snow settling to the floor. Let the dark be soft around you, not an empty dark, not a frightening one. The deep, living dark of the sea, full of gentle creatures, lit by soft blue light, fed by falling snow, ancient and patient and calm. The kind of dark that holds you rather than hides things from you. The kind of dark that has been keeping its quiet watch over the bottom of the world for 100 million years, and will keep it for 100 million more, and asks nothing of you but that you let yourself rest within it. Feel how completely you are held. The water surrounds you on every side, soft and cool and even, pressing so gently and so equally that it feels not like pressure at all, but like an embrace. The whole vast, patient ocean, holding you, cradling you, exactly as it cradles every gentle creature that has learned to call the deep its home. You do not have to hold yourself up. You do not have to hold anything at all. The deep is holding you now. You can let every muscle soften and let your whole weight settle into the soft, dark water and be held, and let your breathing go on slowing, all on its own, slow and deep and easy, like the long, slow drift of the snow. In, slowly, and out, slowly. Each breath a little softer than the last. Each breath carrying you a little deeper into the quiet. There is nothing to do but breathe and drift and let the deep hold you, and let the slow blue lights drift by in the dark, and let sleep come. Far above you, the world goes on, bright and loud and hurried, as it always does. But none of it reaches here. None of it reaches down through all those kilometers of dark, patient water to where you are resting now. At the bottom of everything, the noise of the day is gone. The weight of it is gone. The long list of things undone. The small worries. The bright, sharp edges of the waking world, all of it is far above, on the distant surface, and it cannot follow you down here. Here there is only the soft, dark, and the gentle silence, and the slow falling snow, and the deep, holding you. Let the snow keep falling, soft and slow, all through the dark. Let each lingering thought become a single drifting flake, and let it settle, gently, to the floor far below, and grow still. There is no thought tonight worth keeping hold of. There is no worry worth carrying down into sleep. Let them all become snow, and let them all drift softly down, and let them all settle, quietly, into the deep, until your mind is as calm and as clear and as quiet as the still dark water all around you. And let the slow blue lights drift by, the soft pulse of a jellyfish, far off in the black, the faint, gentle spark of some patient creature in the dark, the little flying octopus, flapping its soft fins, drifting dreamily through the cold, the small, pale snailfish, calm and unhurried at the bottom of the world. They are your companions now, in the quiet dark, and they are all at peace, every one of them drifting, glowing softly, asking nothing, fearing nothing, perfectly at home in the deep. Let yourself be at peace among them. Let yourself drift as they drift, slow and weightless and calm, deeper and deeper into the soft, dark, quiet, deeper and deeper towards sleep. There is no bottom left to reach. You have already come all the way down. There is no further to fall, nothing more to find, nowhere else to go. There is only this, the soft, dark water, the gentle silence, the slow blue lights, the falling snow, and you, held safely in the deep, drifting slowly down into sleep. So let go now, the last small distance. Let the waking world fade, softly, the way the light faded as we sank slowly, gently, layer by layer, until there was only the quiet dark and the peace of it. Let your thoughts settle to the floor like snow. Let your breathing slow to the slow rhythm of the deep. Let the soft dark water hold you, and the ancient silence wrap around you, and the gentle creatures drift by in the black, and let yourself sink, softly and without fear, into the deep and dreamless quiet at the bottom of the world. Rest now. There is nothing left to do. The descent is complete, the deep is calm, and you are held, safe and weightless, in the soft dark water, far below every storm and every sound. The deep will keep its mysteries without you tonight. The snow will go on falling, soft and slow, in the dark. The slow blue lights will drift on, glowing gently, through the quiet water. The great patient ocean will go on holding the bottom of the world in its ancient, untroubled calm, exactly as it always has, all through the long night and into the morning, whether you are awake to know it or not. So you can let go of your watch at last. You can set it all down, softly, and rest. There is nothing to keep hold of, nothing to solve, nothing to fear. There is only the deep, dark, gentle water holding you close and the slow, soft drift downward in the quiet. Rest now. The deep is keeping its watch. And so, for tonight, you can finally let go of yours. Sleep well, and drift gently down into the deep and peaceful dark, where the great quiet ocean keeps its ancient calm at the bottom of the world and holds you, softly, until morning.